Philippines supported by United States, Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Russia. International Monitoring Team 1969 to 2014. Moro, MNLF MILF former support. Libya, Malaysia from 1991. Jihadist groups. Abu Sayyaf Bif Ansar Khalifa, Philippines. The Moro conflict was an insurgency in the Mindanao region of the Philippines from 1969 to 2019. In the 1960s, political tensions and open hostilities developed between the Philippine government and Moro Muslim rebel groups. The Moro insurgency was triggered by the Jabida Massacre in 1968, during which 60 Filipino Muslim commandos on a planned operation to reclaim the eastern part of the Malaysian state of Sabah were killed. In response, University of the Philippines Professor Noor Miswari established the Moro National Liberation Front, an armed insurgent group committed to establishing an independent Mindanao. In the following years, the MNLF splintered into several different groups, including the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, which sought to establish an Islamic state within the Philippines. The Moro conflict is rooted in a long history of resistance by the Bangsamoro people against foreign rule, including the American annexation of the Philippines in 1898. Moro resistance against the Philippine government has persisted ever since. Casualty statistics vary for the conflict, though the conservative estimates of the Uppsala Conflict Data Program indicate that at least 6,015 people were killed in armed conflict between the government of the Philippines and the Abu Sayyaf, BIFM, MILF, and MNLF factions between 1989 and 2012. Artifacts. The Moro people have had a history of resistance against foreign rule for more than 400 years. During the Spanish-Moro conflict, Spain repeatedly tried to conquer the Moro Sultanate of Sulu, Sultanate of Maguindano, and the Confederation of Sultanates in Lanao. The armed struggle against the Spanish, Americans, Japanese, and Christian Filipinos is considered by current Moro Muslim leaders to be part of a 4-century-long national liberation movement of the Bangsamoro. The foundations of the modern conflict can be traced to the Spanish and American wars against the Moros. Following the Spanish-American War in 1898, another conflict sparked in the southern Philippines between the revolutionary Muslims in the Philippines and the United States military that took place between 1899 and 1913. On August 14, 1898, after defeating Spanish forces, the United States claimed the Philippines as its territory under the Treaty of Paris of 1898, establishing a military government under General Wesley Merritt as military governor. Filipinos immediately opposed foreign rule by the United States. American forces took control from the Spanish government in Jolo on May 18, 1899, and at Zamboanga in December 1899. Brigadier General John C. Bates was sent to negotiate a treaty with the Sultan of Sulu, Jamalul Kiram II. Kiram was disappointed by the American takeover, as he expected to regain sovereignty after the defeat of Spanish forces in the archipelago. Bates' main goal was to guarantee Moro neutrality in the Philippine-American War, and to establish order in the southern Philippines. After some negotiation, the Bates Treaty was signed, which was based on an earlier Spanish treaty. The Bates Treaty did ensure the neutrality of the Muslims in the south, but it was actually set up to buy time for the Americans until the war in the north ended. On March 20, 1900, Bates was replaced by Brigadier General William August Cobb and the District of Mindanao Jolo was upgraded to a full department. American forces in Mindanao were reinforced and hostilities with the Moro people lessened. Although there are accounts of Americans and other civilians being attacked and slain by Moros. The American invasion began in 1904 and ended at the term of Major General John J. Pershing, the third and final military governor of Moro province. Although major resistance continued in Mount Bagsak and Bud Daho in Jolo. In the latter, the United States military killed hundreds of Moro in the Moro Crater Massacre. After the war, in 1915, the Americans imposed the Carpenter Treaty on Sulu. Repeated rebellions by the Moros against American rule continued to break out even after the main Moro rebellion ended, right up to the Japanese occupation of the Philippines during World War II. During the Japanese invasion, the Moros waged an insurgency against the Japanese on Mindanao and Sulu until Japan surrendered in 1945. Moro juramentados attacked the Spanish, Americans, Philippine Constabulary, and the Japanese. The American colonial government and subsequently the Philippine government pursued a policy of intra-ethnic migration by resettling significant numbers of Christian Filipino settlers from Thay, Visayas and Luzon onto tracts of land in Mindanao. Beginning in the 1920s, this policy allowed Christian Filipinos to outnumber both the Moro and Lumad populations by Thay.